The military seized power in what it called a targeted operation against criminals in President Robert Mugabe's entourage, making it unclear whether the takeover would bring a formal end to the 93-year-old's rule. Zimbabwe's military appeared to be in control of the country as generals denied staging a coup but used state television to vow to target criminals close to President Mugabe. November 15, 2017. AFP Zimbabweans were weighing an uncertain future without President Robert Mugabe on Thursday after the army took power and placed the 93-year-old veteran, once seen as a liberation hero, under house arrest. Mugabe is insisting he remains Zimbabwe's only legitimate ruler, an intelligence source said on Thursday, and is resisting mediation by a Catholic priest to allow the former guerrilla a graceful exit after a military coup. The priest, Fidelis Mukanori, is acting as a middleman between Mugabe and the generals, who seized power on Wednesday in a targeted operation against criminals in his entourage, a senior political source said. TRT World's Alakanaya Lar has more. Most people in the country have not known a time without Mugabe, who has been at the epicenter of public life since coming to power in 1980 on the country's independence from Britain. The nation was left stunned after the ailing leader was confined to his residence late on Tuesday as soldiers took up positions at strategic points across Harare and senior officers commandeered state television. The army appears to want Mugabe, who has led Zimbabwe since independence in 1980, to go quietly and allow a smooth and bloodless transition to former Vice-President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Still seen by many Africans as a liberation hero, Mugabe is reviled in the West as a despot whose disastrous handling of the economy and willingness to resort to violence to maintain power pauperized one of Africa's most promising states. The Southern African Development Community bloc, currently chaired by Zimbabwe's powerhouse neighbor South Africa, was to meet in Botswana later on Thursday to discuss the dramatic situation. Though nothing has been heard from Mugabe or his wife Grace directly since the start of the army operation, many Zimbabweans are hopeful that the crisis will mark the beginning of a more prosperous future. Political sources say Mugabe, Grace and allies are under house arrest at the Blue House in Harare. Our economic situation has deteriorated every day, no employment, no jobs, Tafadzwa Misango, a 35-year-old unemployed man said. We hope for a better Zimbabwe after the Mugabe era. We feel very happy. It is now his time to go. Harare's residents have largely ignored the military presence on the streets and continued commuting, socializing and working much as normal, while analysts speculated that Mugabe and the army could be negotiating a transition. An uncertain future. Derek Matishuk, an analyst at the Pretoria-based Institute for Security Studies, said he expects Mugabe and the military are thrashing out a handover to a new head of state. I think Mugabe can still stay in the country. I think they would like to present him as a liberation icon and accord him due respect. The difficulty, and this has always been the difficulty for the Mugabe family, is guaranteeing Grace Mugabe's safety. On the demise of Robert, the international community will also be in the next phase of the crisis closely. On Wednesday, the African Union issued an unusually terse statement that said the situation on the ground seems like a coup and called on the military to pull back and respect the constitution. Britain, Zimbabwe's colonial ruler until independence, called for calm and warned against handing power to an unelected leader. Nobody wants simply to see the transition from one unelected tyrant to the next, said British Foreign Minister Boris Johnson. We are monitoring events in Zimbabwe closely and embassy staff are on hand providing support to Brits. Urge those in country to follow travel advice, remain at home or in accommodation until situation is clearer. https://t.cosgexvyorha, Boris Johnson at Boris Johnson, November 15, 2017. A political purge. Zimbabwe's army was set on a collision course with Mugabe last week when he abruptly fired his vice president Emmerson Mnangagwa, a linchpin of the defense and security establishment. Mnangagwa, 75, was previously one of Mugabe's most loyal lieutenants, having worked alongside him for decades, but he fled to South Africa following his dismissal and published a scathing 5-page rebuke of Mugabe's leadership and Grace's political ambition. Army Chief General Constantino Chiwenga gave an unprecedented press conference on Monday, flanked by dozens of officers, and warned Mugabe that he would intervene if the president continued to purge the ruling ZANU-PF party. Mnangagwa has been embroiled in a long-running feud with Mugabe's wife Grace, 52. Both were seen as leading contenders to replace Mugabe, but Mnangagwa had the tacit support of the armed forces, which viewed Grace, a political novice, with derision. In a sign that the military was purging the First Lady's backers, a Grace loyalist widely reported to have been detained by the army appeared on state TV late on Wednesday. Kudzai Chipunga, leader of the ZANU-PF's Youth League, apologized for criticizing Chiwenga following the general's threat to intervene against Mugabe. I kindly request General Chiwenga to please accept my apologies on behalf of the Youth League and myself. We are still young people, we are still growing up. We learn from our mistakes, said Chipunga. In contrast to the high political drama unfolding behind closed doors, the streets of the capital remained calm, with people going about their daily business, albeit under the eye of soldiers on armored vehicles at strategic locations. Source: AFP.